Her son, her husband, 4 cats, and a pug in the Missouri Ozarks is here today. She has 7 women's fiction titles published with Harper Collins. For the last 13 years, she has been an instructor of English and Communications at Arkansas State University in Mountain Home. Annie will be speaking today on preparing your manuscript for publication, for editors and agents rather. So let's give Annie a good Springfield Writers Guild welcome. Come on down.
Because I don't know where you are in the process of writing. I don't know what you write. I don't know how you write. I don't know if you have queried agents or editors before. So do some of you kind of want to tell me a little bit about where you are in the process of writing and what you write? Does anybody want to offer that?
I think we got all of it. All of the above.
I have written dark thrillers, psychological thrillers, but I'm in the process of having 2 different genres, one edited, and I'm about to finish up a different genre. One of them would probably be, well, actually both of them maybe are upmarket fiction.
Oh, that's great.
So I'm going to be querying both of those, so this is going to help.
Oh, good. Great.
I did query last year at the Between the Pages writers conference that we helped put on. So I have one experience, and it was pretty good.
Good. Well, it can be, have any of you queried any literary agents or publishers before?
Nerve-wracking.
It's nerve-wracking, right? And it's exhilarating, but it's also really, really scary. And it's also a lot of work, right? Because there's a lot of research that goes into querying a literary agent. And you also have to decide, okay, now that you have given birth to this manuscript, because I often compare writing to giving birth, which I've also done. So yeah, I feel like I can make that comparison. But what we write, it's like our children, right? And we don't really want anyone to tell us it's not good, right? But I can say I have probably been rejected by 150 literary agents in my lifetime, so a lot. Like I could wallpaper a bathroom with rejection letters. For my first book was published in 2015. I wrote it in 2012, and even after I got a literary agent, I was rejected by lots of publishers. We think getting a literary agent means, yes, I've done it, which is great because you have done it, but then your agent also has to sell your book, right? Which means a whole new round of rejections begin. Maybe not for everybody, but certainly for me, I had to rewrite my book, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, even after I found a literary agent, because it just wasn't quite there. It wasn't quite ready. I was really lucky in that I found a literary agent who saw potential in what I had written and knew that we could find a home for it, but it still needed some work. Which that's why you're here, right? Because you're always working. Even now, in every book I have ever written, I find a mistake. And that is after I have read it, my editor has read it, the copy editors have read it and made it bleed. And then we have, readers who read it and it goes through a first pass and a second pass. So, it's a lot of work. And so it's difficult when you spend all this time writing a book and then you have to spend all of this time preparing your manuscript for agents and editors, for them to only say no, right? But all you have to get is one yes. So my question for you is, essentially, what questions do you have about finding agents and editors? I can talk to you all day long about this. I gave you like a 3-page handout and then my query letter. I love to talk about this. I think it's really fun. But I also want to know what questions you might have, because I want to make sure that I answer that you get your money's worth, that you are, this is a productive session for you. So do any of you have questions right off the bat? Yes.
Where do you even start?
Where do you start? That's a great question. Whew. So I started with this was back in 2012, with the 2013 Guide to Literary Agents. Chuck Stambuccino writes that book. It comes out new every year, and it's wonderful. It's a really great physical guide to literary agents. Now, not every literary agent is going to be in there, and not every literary agent in there is going to be open to queries, right? But it's a really good place to start, because if you just do a Google search for literary agents, you're going to get a lot of crap, basically, before you can find something that might work for you. So I think that the guide to literary agents is really good. And what I tell people is, first you have to decide what is what I have created. What is it meant for, right? Have you written literary fiction that would be best suited for a small press? Because literary fiction historically isn't commercial fiction, right? And so it might be better suited for a small press. Have you written commercial fiction or commercial nonfiction? Do you need to start looking for a literary agent? Because most small presses, you can query them without one, even though I always recommend having a literary agent, but you don't necessarily have to have one for a small press. So, what do I want to do with this? What's it suited for? That's the first question you have to ask yourself. And be honest with yourself about what you've got. The next thing that you have to do is, if you're going to go the way of looking for a literary agent, you need to look for literary agents who represent what you write. Do not query a literary agent who only takes, upmarket women's fiction if you've written science fiction. They're not going to be interested, and you're wasting their time and your time, right? So you want to make sure that you're finding a literary agent who represents what you write. You want to make sure you find a literary agent who is accepting new queries, new submissions. That's really important. And the other thing that you want to do is make sure you only reach out to that literary agent with the information that they request. Each agent is different. It's like I tell my students, every English teacher on this campus is different. Some of us want you to use the Oxford comma. Everyone should use it, I think. Some of us don't want you to use the Oxford comma, but make sure you know between each teacher what we want. And the same thing is true for literary agents. They're all going to be asking for different things. So if you look at that sample query letter, you can see down at the bottom, this agent asked for a brief synopsis, as well as the first 10 pages of the manuscript, in addition to the query letter. So when I went to their website to look for agents who were open to submissions and who accepted the kind of writing that I did, which is women's fiction, back in 2000, 2002, we would have called it chick lit. We don't call it that anymore. But that's essentially what I write. I had to find an agent that represented those kind of books. So it's also a good idea to know what your book compares to. What are some books out there currently on the market that you could compare your writing to? And that will help that literary agent, make a connection. Okay, it's similar to this, right? It doesn't have to be exactly like it, but it should be, if you can find something that's in the same vein as what you write, that's helpful. But some literary agents only want the query letter. So only send that, right? Don't send them your entire manuscript. They won't want it. Some agents want a query letter and a synopsis, which I hate. I hate writing synopsises. But you send those two things. This agent in particular wanted 3 things. So I sent her the first 10 pages and nothing else. Even if it ends in the middle of a sentence, only send what they ask for. Because these agents get, thousands, right, of queries every year. And even though it's not in most writers' nature to follow the rules, right? We don't do that. For me, it's because my brain doesn't work that way, and I'm just not good at following rules. I'm not good at following directions. But when you are looking to find a literary agent, it's really important to follow the rules. You have to do what they're asking you to do so that your query doesn't get thrown out immediately. And, that you can make it through and they actually read it and read what you sent. Does that help? That answer a little bit? Yeah.
I have a question before you get beyond your synopsis. How long is, you said they wanted a short synopsis. Is it a page? Is it a half a page? Is it 5 pages? How long is that?
You can make that decision. Sometimes they will be specific and say, I want a 2-page synopsis. I think the synopsis that I sent was about 500 words. When I write a synopsis for my editor, when I really want to sell a book, and I haven't written it yet, I have to write a synopsis, and it's like 5,000 words. They don't want that, right? They don't want your chapter outline. My agent wanted a chapter outline eventually, but they just want a brief overview of what you've written. They just want to know what you've written, essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
What about platforms? I've noticed a lot of agents want a huge platform. Well, how do you
Isn't that the worst?
when you're starting out, how do you do that? I mean,
I don't know. My agent made me create an author page on Facebook, even though I didn't have a book sold, and that felt weird. But she reminded me that just because you haven't sold a book doesn't mean you're not a writer. And I think, at least I do, I struggle with imposter syndrome a lot. Even when I came in and sat down, I thought, these people aren't going to want, they're not going to want to hear what I have to say, right? They're not going to be interested. We tend to worry kind of a little bit about, especially maybe what other people think. Well, if they don't have anything out here, then, you shouldn't have an author page. You should definitely have an author page. Even if you're just posting short things that you write. If you write short story, you can post those things. You can post pictures. You can post what you did at your Writers Guild meeting, right?
so like I regular contributor to a podcast with short stories.
That's awesome.
Is that considered to be part of a platform?
Oh, yeah. They do, and that's more for nonfiction, that they want you to have a platform, but it is important to be visible, unfortunately. I'm not very good at it. I have to work really hard at marketing myself, because it does not come naturally to me. I try to understand book talk on TikTok, and I'm not that, I'm 41, so I'm not too old to understand it, but I don't know how to make it work. But you just have to figure it out. And it's important to figure out what works for you, right? If Facebook works for you, do Facebook. If Instagram works, if Twitter works, if having just your own website works, then do that. So that you can say, well, I do, or a newsletter. Do any of you have a newsletter? Newsletters are a great idea for authors, even if you're not currently writing anything. Because then you have that base already built in that agents and editors are looking for. So it's a good idea, even if you don't want to. Yes.
So what if you're kind of switching? I'll just use myself. I've written a lot of articles and journals and stuff like that for what I used to do for work, but nothing like what I want to do now in retirement. Do you include that experience? I see you listed
Yes.
some stuff that was general there.
I listed whatever I had at the time, because if I were looking for an agent now, I would put, I've written 7 books for Harper Collins, if that's what I were doing now. But at the time, I had this coffee table book, Gilroy's Theater Beautiful, that my graduate class did in 2006. And I had some poetry that had been published in the Moon City Review and Red Booth Review, I can't remember. So I used anything that you can come up with that sounds even remotely legitimate. Use it, right? Because it makes you look like more of a professional, like you know what you're doing. And essentially, the query letter is selling yourself, right? Which again, writers are not historically good at. It's hard, right? So anything that you can come up with that, if you can sell yourself, do it. But what you don't want to do with your query letter, it should be about a page. Mine is, this was in an email. Now, agents and editors both, when you're sending a query, they don't want something super long because they've got maybe 100 more that they have to read that day. So it needs to be pretty to the point. If you have hundreds and hundreds of publications, then pick the highlights, right? If you're like me and only had a few, then I could just add them all in there because that was all I had at the time. But you want to make sure that you have a hook that your potential agent might be interested in. So for me, the neighbor of the main character in my book dances outside in his underwear, and I thought that might be something that an agent would read, and they might keep reading, right, just for the sake of reading something like that. So if you have a hook that you can draw that agent in, that's always a really good idea. And then obviously you have to tell that agent a little bit about your work. And this is true for editors as well. If you're querying editors and you don't need an agent, or you don't want an agent, the same thing applies. And then you have to tell the agent about your book. What's it about? How long is it? So for me, it was 80,000 words. I said that because if your novel is 47,000 words, it's not long enough, right? And depending on the genre you write, I write women's fiction, so 75 to 90,000 words. I know that. So that's what I'm going to stick with, right? I'm not going to write 150,000 words for women's fiction. I might if I were writing science fiction, right? So knowing your genre is also really important. Knowing what's expected for word count, knowing the field and what's expected. So my book was 80,000 words. So I told them a little bit about my book, and then at the end, I told them a little bit about who I am. And I always include, I have a degree in English, where I went to school usually, and where I teach, just because that's relevant information, because I work in English. I work in that field, so, I wanted them to know, because it made me sound, again, like I knew what I was doing. Even if you don't, you want them to think that you know. Yes?
In regard to the format, as far as fonts, I'll throw a few tidbits out here. Recommended font or fonts, mixing of fonts, staying consistent with the font, size of font, 12 point, don't go below 12, don't go below 10, go to 14, shorter is better, try to fit in more by shrinking.
Don't shrink.
Don't shrink.
Don't shrink. In general, 12 point Times New Roman is just the font of forever, right? Not that you can't use a different font, but fancy fonts are not going to catch the attention of a lit agent, and in fact, it will annoy them. So don't use fancy font. Just sell yourself by what you say, and don't scrunch something down to 8-point font so that you can fit way more in. Don't do that. They won't like that either. Yes.
Is there an agent on the face of the earth that takes a written paper?
I don't know. Back even in the first time I tried querying agents, and I was woefully unprepared, was in 2009, for nonfiction, and even then I had to send email queries. Some of them may accept, the paper query, but I think most of them expect an email. And so it's a good idea to have an email just for your authoring stuff, right? So that when you query an agent, you have, like, my email address is aenoblin81@gmail.com. Just very, simple and straightforward. I don't give them my work email address. I don't give them my other email address, which is Noblin Goblin, because that doesn't seem very professional. So, I try to have something relatively professional that they can reach back out to, and I only use it for writer stuff. So only my editor, my agent, the publicist, everybody at Harper, email me there, and that's where I conduct business. So it's a really good idea just to have one of those that you use only for that. But I just don't know. It'll say on their website if they, you gotta go online regardless, but it should say, and in the guide to agents, and it might say there too. Yes?
Some very small religious publishers take an actual, mail this packet to me.
That's good to know.
But that's just about it that I've found.
Yeah, most people want it because it's faster, right? And, I wrote everything in Word first and, spell checked it because I do have a master's degree in English, but not in spelling. So I'm a creative writer. That's what I tell my students when I'm writing on the board. Please tell me if I misspell something, because I am not the greatest speller in the world. So I run everything through a spell check. And then I usually copy and paste it over into the body of the email because I worry. Somebody, yeah?
Should you avoid self-publishing before you request queries?
No, in general, no. But if you hold the copyright to that, right? And it's self-published for, for everyone to see. But if you're querying an agent, a lot of times they don't mind to go look at things that are self-published, right? If you've already got something out there, don't link them your self-published work. If they ask for 10 pages, don't send them a link to go read. They're not going to click on it. Still send, the 10 pages. But you do need to tell them that you have this work self-published, especially if that's what you're querying. So if you've self-published something and it's still out there, like on Amazon or wherever for people to buy, you do need to let them know up front that it's been self-published. But if you have self-published in the past and you're querying a new project, that's up to you. You can tell them or not. But if it's self-published and you're querying that, you do need to tell them. That way they can just go look. But I don't think that they usually care. especially if your book has been really successful, they really don't care, right? They really like that. Yes.
I have several self-published nonfiction titles, and I'm at the point now where I have a fiction novel, and I've been really torn between going for traditional or just self-publishing it the way that I know how. So, and you may not want to answer this, if a book sells for $10, how much do you get as traditionally published author?
Your royalty rate will depend on the way that it's published. So if I have a book that comes out, and I'd have to go back to my contract to look at my exact royalty rate, but the royalty rate is different. So if I have a book that is hardback, so they publish it in hardback, you'll have one royalty rate. There'll be another royalty rate for the trade paperback version. If it then goes to mass market, there's another royalty rate. If you have an audiobook, there's another royalty rate. If you have an ebook, there's another royalty rate. So the royalty rates are different depending on the mode that your book is published. And if you go with a press that doesn't offer an advance, then your royalty rate will likely be higher, right? If you are looking to query a publisher and that publisher doesn't offer an advance, which is just an advance against royalties, right? You have to pay that back in sales before you start getting royalties if you're given an advance. That's how the advance works. But if they don't offer an advance, then they should offer you a higher rate of royalties. Sometimes like 8%. It kind of depends.
8%.
It would be, because I think standard is about 5.
So a $10 book, you get 50 cents.
Something like that, yeah. And so, again, that's what you have to decide. What's important to me? What do I want? What am I expecting, right? I wanted an agent and I wanted an editor because I wanted to be traditionally published. That was my goal. I wanted that. But that may not be important for other people, so you have to decide what's the most important for you when it comes to moving forward. But if they don't offer you an advance, it should be a good royalty rate, for sure. Yes?
Do they help traditional, do they help market it all anymore?
They do. A lot of it will depend on a lot of things. So when I get ready to have a book come out, I had a book come out in September. So about 6 months before that book came out, we started having marketing meetings. So I met with my editor, my agent, we're both in the meeting, and then we did Zoom because obviously Harper's in New York and I'm not. So we would do Zoom meetings with the two of them plus the person who had been assigned to marketing, the person who had been assigned to publicity. I think there were about 4 people outside of my editor and agent who were on my book. And they told me their plan. Here's what we're gonna do, here's when we're gonna release things. They did a little trailer, they tweeted, they did a lot of tweeting. My book was published through Harper with the Avon imprint. Before that, my books came out through William Morrow. So it was a little bit different.
So they have connections that they'll use, and not just expect the author to use whatever little platform they have.
No, that's...
They want that, I'm sure, but...
Yes, they want you to be, proactive and get out there. And, most speaking engagements or book signing events that I do, I get myself because I live in the Ozarks, and they do not understand us in New York City. I can't remember the word that they used, exotic. And I said, okay, So they don't understand it. So if it's here, if it's local, I do a lot of legwork. I make a lot of connections, and you have to do that. But your traditional publisher will do things that are sort of beyond your realm.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
I'm writing 3 different genres, and so I now have 3 different pseudonyms. Is that a bad thing?
Well, I don't know. A lot of writers have you should probably have your main name, right? Whichever one you plan to publish under the most.
When I query, do I use my name or who I'm going to...
Use your name. For example, I guess I have a pseudonym because my first name is Emily. My middle name is Anne, but my whole life I've been Annie, and that's my parents' fault. And so when I queried, it was Annie England Noblin, and I didn't think about my first name being Emily until it got time to be paid. And then they said, we can't write checks to somebody who doesn't exist. and I had to give them my real name. So it's probably a good idea to use your real name when you're querying, and then once you've secured an agent, you can tell them, this is the name that I go by, so when you're submitting to editors at these houses, please use my pen name, and they will, which is what I should have done, but I was an idiot and didn't know any better.
My question on that is I have self-published 5 books that are under one pen name, but this new genre is totally different, and I've been told that they're opposite ends of the spectrum, so.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't think that matters. You know, if you're looking to grow an audience, using one name is helpful. Because you can pull in people that, you get people who might not normally read this type of book that you're writing, but they will because they're already fans of your work, right? Which is what you want. You want them to come over. So I would suggest using one name, and then later, like I would really love to write what my Nana called heaving bosom books, with like Fabio on the cover. And if I do that, I will use a pen name just for fun, because it'll be like a fun side project. But anything else, right now, 7 books in, I'm still a baby, right? I need all of the publicity I can get under my own name so that I can build up enough of a fan base and readership that my editor feels comfortable buying my book, because that's the point, right? This is a business. And an agent is only going to accept a manuscript that they think they can sell to an editor, and an editor is only going to accept a manuscript that they think they can sell, right? That's just the truth.
Just a comment, I write nonfiction, but when I wrote my first book under my name, and then I got married, and when the second book came out, I thought I should use my legal name, and my editor said, no way, you want to connect back to the first book.
Yes, yes.
I was planning on 2 of the names filtering back to one website where it would explain them.
You could. That's up to you. The things that I had published before I was published by Harper my name was Annie England, and so that's why I kept Annie England Noblin in my name, because anytime they would search for me, they'd have to use that England, and that would be the place where they would see everything, because I was a whole person before I married my husband, right? And I had all these other things, and so I wanted them to be able to find it. So you want, if they're looking for you, if they're going to Google you, and they probably will if they're interested, you want them to be able to find your work. That's just my opinion. Yes?
A few more about the query letter. So parchment versus copy paper, logos, images, bells and whistles.
Well, that was an email. So you won't have to do that in an email, because so that's a good question, because when you send a query letter, you want it in the body of the email. Do not send them an attachment for your query letter unless they specifically ask for it. You want them, when they open that email, for them to see the query letter immediately. I'm not saying that agents are lazy, but they have a lot of work to do, right? So they may not click on any attachments. When I sent the query letter, I sent the synopsis and the first 10 pages all in the body of the email, because that's what the agent asked for. Now, if the agent asks for attachments, send it. But when you go to a website, which is what you should do if you happen to buy the book and you're looking at the book, I had a system. I highlighted the agents that I thought were the best for me in pink. And I had, next best in green, next best in yellow. And then I went to their websites to see if they were open to submissions. And if they were, I queried them specifically how they told me to do it, and then I wrote a little note in the book, queried, and then very often next to it, the rejection date, right? But that was my system. That was my system. For me, that's what worked. And somebody, yeah.
Back to the query letter again. You personalized the salutation, dear.
Yes.
And down in your 3rd or 4th paragraph, you said, "I'm querying you because."
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Yes. Okay. Good. Thank you. Okay. So, writers are vain. Agents are vain. They want to know why you are querying them. Why did you pick them out of all of the agents? And what you don't want to say is, well, because I'm desperate and you are open to submissions. Don't say that. Don't say that, even if it's true. Because you can query 100 different agents at once. There is no law that says you can't do that. Do that. Query as many agents as you possibly can. Always. Don't query one and then wait. Query as many as you possibly can. So you need to read up on this agent a little bit. And on any website, agency website, under each agent, there should be a list of books that they have sold, right? They should have sales to major houses. That's why you want a literary agent. That's the main purpose of the literary agent. They act as a go-between between the writer and the commercial publishing house. So they should have a list. They may also have a biography, right? And in that biography, they might say that they love small-town, heartwarming women's fiction, right? And that's my jam. That's what I write. So in my query letter, I'm going to tell them, I'm querying you because, and if you have to BS a little bit, do it, right? But there should be some kind of a connection, anything you can use to say, I'm querying you because your website indicates that you appreciate or that you like this type of book. And if you can't find anything that would make it so that they might be interested in your work, then you maybe shouldn't query them at all. There should be some indication that they're interested in what you do. Yes?
Do you have any suggestions for a subject line?
Usually they also tell you what they want. I can't remember what my subject line was. I think it was probably something like my fiction novel, sit, say, speak, or something like that. They'll tell you when they give you the rules for how to query what they want in the subject, so they can be alerted that it's a query. Yes?
Where was that guide to literary agents that you suggested?
I got it at Barnes & Noble.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure that they still have it because there should be a big section. So it should.
On Amazon.
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
We used to have it at the library.
You could check it out from the library. I loaned my 2013 copy out. And keep in mind, again, it won't have every literary agent. So I worked my way through that book, and I had partials or fulls out to several agents, and I was like anxious, and I wanted to query more. So I also went on the internet because by that point I knew enough about what to look for that I felt like I could do that. Because if you look over here at this fun little handout, this gives you a little bit of information about what you should look for in an agent and what you should avoid. And one thing that you should avoid is a scam agent. And just like every other industry, especially in the entertainment industry, which is what writing is, there are a lot of scammers out there. Just like there are scam publishers, right? Who say, we'll publish your book, and then you end up being out $6,000 and nothing to show for it. The same thing is true for literary agents. And a bad literary agent and a scam agent are two completely different things. A scam agent usually will charge a reading fee. So you'll query them and they'll say, yes, I'd love to read what you write, but I charge a $50 reading fee. That should be an indication to you that they are making their money off of writers and not off of the publishers, right? Agents should not get paid until you do. And however you have to jam that into your brain, remember that. My literary agent didn't take a cent from me. I have never written her a check. I might have bought dinner once, but I mean, like, I've never paid her any money. She got paid when I sold my book, and she gets the industry standard, which is 15%, 20% on any foreign royalties. So I have a book that's published in German and in the Nordic languages, so that she gets 20%. But 15% is industry standard, and they should never ask you for any money. So you shouldn't pay a yearly fee to be agented by them. Because they're not going to take you if they don't think that they can sell your book, right? That's the whole point. So you should never be paying your literary agent ever to work with them. So if you get that, say no. Anytime. That means that they're making money off of the writers and not off of selling the book to publishing houses. Bad agents are a little bit different. They're probably not going to charge you any fees, but they're also never going to sell your book. And having a bad agent is worse than having no agent. Bad agents want to be good. Most of them do, right? But they either don't have the ability, or they don't have the contacts, or they don't have the experience to do so. Any agent that you query or that you accept, to be your agent, when you sign that contract, you should know that they have sales to some major houses. If they're only selling to e-publishers or small presses, there's nothing wrong with that. But you can sell your book to a small press or an e-publisher on your own. You don't need an agent for that. Agents sell to the big houses. So that's what you are looking for. They should have sales, and if they don't have sales, that's a red flag. Yes?
What's the typical length of an agent's contract with you?
My contract was 2 years, and then we upped it every 2 years, and I've been with my agent since 2013.
Do they expect like so many books a year then from you, or?
No. Okay, I can only speak to my experience, but no. My agent, I write about a book a year, just about a book a year. And so that's kind of what she expects, but there is no expectation. I have no contract with her. Now with the publisher, for Harper Collins, my last contract was for 2 books. So I just finished a book in October. It'll be out this coming September. And I still have another book that I have to write for them. And it has to be done, in a certain time. But for agents, that's typically not a thing.
Do the publishers get them out pretty quickly? I mean, or do you like get the contract with them and then you wait 2 years?
Oh, it's so slow.
I know one of our writers waited several years.
It's so slow. You shouldn't have to wait several years, but it depends. Okay, so I sold my first book in May of 2014, and it came out in September of 2015. And that's about it's about typical, right? If I sell a book that I haven't written yet, then it's about 2 years because I haven't written it. So I have to write it, and then I have to submit it to my editor, and then we go through the editing. We talk about it. My editor and I talk about it, and then once we're done, then it goes to the copy editors, and the copy editors, I just got a copy edit back. Oh, I hate copy editors. I love them, but I hate them. So it goes to them, and then I have to answer all of the queries. A lot of people think that if you get an agent or an editor that they're going to tell you what to write and how to write it, and I cannot express to you enough how untrue that is. My editor makes no changes to my books, ever. She doesn't touch it. Now, she might suggest to me that I need to make some changes, right? She might tell me, here's what works, here's what I'm concerned about. She doesn't ever make me make changes, but she will be very honest, and you want to listen. I want to listen to her. She's an executive VP at Harper. She knows what she's doing, right? Sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't, and I have to go home and think about it and think about what I can do and how we can, but she never goes in and makes any changes. Those copy editors make notes out to the side. I have to approve every note. They don't make any changes inside the document itself, but even the notes they make I have to approve before it goes on. If there's a note I don't approve, then we have to have a whole discussion about it. I have to make a note, I don't agree with this. One time I had a copy editor tell me that I couldn't use the word motel because in Washington State they don't use that word. And I said, well, it has doors on the outside, it's a motel. I'm from Oregon County, Missouri, it's a motel. And so we had to go back and forth about, I won. We had to go back and forth a little bit, but agents and editors and copy editors are really there to help you. They don't want to make changes to your work. They want you to work with them to do what's best for your book. And sometimes that means you have to make a lot of changes, or you're asked if you would be interested in making these changes. And with my last book, I didn't have to do any changes until the copy editors got a hold of it, but that's expected. But my editor came back to me and said, I don't have any major edits for this book. I think we can send it straight to copy editing, which was great. It's the first time in my whole life that's ever happened. It will probably never happen again. But, they don't typically want to have to ask you to make changes. They trust you as writers, and you should trust them. If you don't trust your literary agent, if you don't trust your editor, then you're with the wrong people. I trust my literary agent implicitly. I trust my editor. And that's really, really important. Yes?
Whenever you say that they send you back the edits or something, how are they doing that? Is that email or how?
They email it to me. So Harper has I wish I could show you, but they won't let me. There's a little thing at the bottom that says I can't. But it has like a thing about formatting, a letter about formatting, and then it has the entire document in a Word document, and then there are, where you can do the comments out to the side. There are comments out there. I actually had 2 copy editors for this book, so double the fun. And so they would make comments out to, and sometimes the comments are nice, like they thought something was cute and they made a comment about it, which is really great when you've read 6 comments of, you've repeated the word reply too many times, things like that. So they make the comments out to the side, and then I make a note there that says, okay, if I agree, like, hey, you need a comma here, or repetition. Could we change this to exclaimed or, laughed or something like that? And I click OK. Sometimes it'll be bigger things like timeline. I am terrible with timelines, not great. So I might mess something up. And they're like, well, how can it be 2 weeks till Christmas when the last chapter it was 6 weeks to Christmas? Like, what is happening? So, anything bigger than that, and I can go up and make changes. But they don't ever make changes inside the document itself. Yes?
You gave these handouts. Do you have one on editing too?
For editors?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I could probably make one. But I've never submitted to an editor without going through an agent first. I submitted to some publishers before I found my literary agent, but I never submitted. I guess technically I probably submitted to the editors at the publishing place, but it was never. I've never worked with an editor without being agented. So I'm not exactly sure what to look for in a specific editor, if that makes sense. Now I can tell you what to look for as far as publishers go, whether they're good or bad. And I think there's some about that on the next page. Did I talk about that? Oh, down here on 1. So like if you decide not to go with an agent and you decided to find a publisher on your own, how do you know that the publisher you're interested in submitting to is legit? A lot of the same rules apply. A publisher should never ask you for money up front, ever. It's the same thing with your agent. The money should flow to the author and not away from the author, right? Even if it's a tiny little bit of money, it should still be flowing to you. So how do you know if the publisher you're interested in submitting to is legit? And this can be a little bit trickier. So there are commercial publishers we all know, Random House, Simon & Schuster, Penguin, Harper Collins, Hachette. What's the other one? Macmillan. I think we're down. There used to be a big 6. Now there's a big 5, and I can never remember what they are. And so these are the places. The big houses are the places that won't allow you to submit without a literary agent, right? I can't query an editor at Harper without having one. That doesn't mean that they don't have some imprints that allow you to submit unagented. Like they own Harlequin, and so Harlequin will allow you to submit without an agent. Harlequin Teen. So there are a few imprints that would allow you to submit. But in general, if you want to query a major house, you need an agent. There are independent publishers, and there are some big ones like Sourcebooks. There are a bunch. There's one that is like on the tip of my tongue, and I can't remember. A bunch of writers that I like go with this independent publisher, and I can't remember what it's called. But these publishers are reputable, but they generally allow unagented authors to submit, and they're big independent publishers. So you could go to, if you go to Barnes & Noble and you look at the display table, especially for women's fiction like I write, you're going to see Harper, you're going to see Penguin, and then you're also going to see Sourcebooks. They're going to be in there. They're still going to be able to get your book into larger bookstores, but they're considered independent and they don't always expect you to have an agent. Then there are vanity publishers. Everybody knows what those are, right? Those are pay to play. And I'm not here to tell anybody how to publish. That is completely up to you. Writing and publishing is very personal, right? That has to be a decision that you make, what you think is most important and best for you. And finding an agent and a commercial house is not best for everybody. Yes?
When you sign with an agent, you give up all rights to like what the cover looks like?
No. Oh, no.
No?
No, I have to approve my cover.
I mean, do they let you find your own and then say yay or nay on it? Or?
If I could do more than draw a stick figure, maybe. I don't have any experience in creating a cover. So for example, I wish I could show you, but my phone is probably too small. Last week, we talked about possible covers, and 2 months ago, they sent me like 6 possible covers that the art department had drawn up. They're like, do you like any of these? And I picked a couple that I really liked and a couple that I didn't really like. It's called Christmas at Corgi Cove. So obviously we need to have some corgis on the cover. I'm the animal lady. Animals are in every book that I write. So that's part of my trade, right? When somebody buys my book, they expect there to be animals. Sometimes it's a dog, sometimes it's a pig, sometimes it's a hairless cat. It just depends. But they're always animals. So they sent me some covers, and I picked a couple that I liked. And then yesterday, my editor emailed me and my agent and said, hey, here's a couple fonts that we've tried for this cover that you picked. Which one do you like? Or do you not like either? And I'll go back to the art department and tell them she doesn't like either one of those. Fix it. So I'm involved in every step of the way. I can't speak to every single publisher out there, but that's been my experience.
Yeah. What about Audible? Do you have any control?
I get to pick the narrators for audiobooks too. So I don't get to go out and find one that I love. They'll send me options. And I can, so like last time they sent me 4. And they said, do you like any of these? One of them had done a book for me. All of my books are on audio. So I listened to all of them, and I looked at the books that they had narrated before, and I just listened for the one that I thought sounded the most like my main character, which is usually what I do. And I number them. This is the person I'd like the most, 1 through 4. If I didn't like any of them, I could tell them that. So I have options. Do I get to go in and just pick from a huge list? No. I mean, maybe if I asked.
So what if you've had success with one? Like I have 5 Audibles, and I can't imagine anybody else doing it now. So.
You can ask. I've asked for a couple. The person who did my very first book was not associated with Harper. A different audio company bought the rights and did it. The rest of my books have been done in-house by Harper. So I think it was between books 3 and 4. I asked for the same narrator that did 3 because I really liked her, and they got her. So I mean, you could probably ask. Yeah.
Thank you.
I feel like we're almost out of time. Does anybody have any other? Yes.
Let's talk batting averages for a moment.
Okay.
So you're sending query to a qualified recipient, an agent query.
Yes.
So qualified, if you're just not, but to somebody that's in that. What would be an acceptable or standard, or however you want to measure it, of no response, rejection, interest?
I wrote that down in my notes for you all. Usually they'll tell you when you're getting ready to query, like they'll say, this agency, if they're not interested, we will not respond. So no response is a no. Some agencies will tell you if we don't respond within 3 weeks, it's a no. Some agencies will say, we'll respond either way. You'll get a form letter. And when I was querying, sometimes I got a lot of rejections. As I said, sometimes I got a rejection like 6 hours later, and sometimes it was 3 months later. A lot of it depends on how big the volume is going through. I would say when I was asked for a partial, or usually the first thing they'll do is say, hey, I'm interested in what you've written. Can you send me the first 50 pages? That's typical. And so you send them the first 50 pages, and they'll tell you, give me 2 weeks. If you have any partials out to other agents, if you get offered representation in the meantime, please let me know, which is what happened to me. I had about 6 partials out there, and my agent offered me representation, and then I got the fun job of going and telling all of them, which should feel good, but it does not, because it's scary, right? And I had to tell them, hey, I've been offered representation. And then what that does is that makes them even more interested, right, in your book. But usually, if somebody asked for a partial or a full, it was within a couple of weeks, usually. But I got rejections, I don't know, probably clear through the time I sold my book. It just depends on how diligent they are about getting back to people. Some agents have a form rejection, so it won't be personal at all. Some agents send personal rejections, and that is less scary than it seems. Sometimes agents aren't nice. I'll just be honest with you. Sometimes they aren't. I had a couple of rejections after they'd read a little bit, so that's worse, right? After they'd read a little bit, and they weren't particularly kind about the rejection, but that's not often. I can count, I think maybe twice. The entire time did I have someone who was not very kind. Usually what they say is, this project isn't for me right now, but I encourage you to submit future projects to me. And that's great, because what that means is they didn't hate it, right? There are a lot of reasons that they may say no. Maybe they've got 3 other books just like yours, right, that they're trying to sell. Maybe this project wasn't for them. They didn't think that maybe it wasn't developed enough, right? And so, but they know that you're a good writer, and they want you to know that, hey, the door is open. So most of the time when you get a personalized rejection, it's nice. And it's saying, hey, submit future projects. If you have a few pages out there, if they request, like I said, the first 50 pages is typical. They will always get back to you. It may take a little while, but they will always get back to you, whether it's, hey, I want the rest of the book. Usually that comes a couple of weeks later. They want the first 50 pages, and then they say, I'd like the rest of the book, or then they reject it. I've had instances where they read the whole book. I got through all of those steps, and then they were like, no, thanks, but no thanks, right? It's a crapshoot, and a lot of it is not about talent. It's about timing. It's about luck, right? An agent who is looking for what you have written at this exact time, an editor who is looking to buy what you've written at this particular time. It's a lot of it is a luck game.
So I know there's some novels out there where the writing is dreadful, but they're bestsellers, and it's like.
That's why I wrote my first book, because I read 50 Shades of Grey, and I thought if this lady can get a contract, so can I.
I wasn't mentioning it, but yeah.
Yep, I had a 1-year-old and a free weekend, and my students, I was teaching English, and they hated to read, as they do, but they were all reading 50 Shades of Grey. This was in 2012, and I was like, I gotta know what this is about. So I downloaded it onto my iPad, and I was reading it, and I thought, this is the worst crap I have ever read. If this lady can get a contract, so can I. And I had this book in my head for about 5 years, and that night I was reading it in the bathtub. I got out of the bathtub and I started writing my book. Whatever inspires you, right? Somebody had their hand raised. Yeah.
Whenever you say that you submit the first 50 pages, how do you do that?
Usually that's an attachment. If they ask you to send, and they'll tell you, again, agents are very specific, they'll tell you what they want. They'll say, send me the first 50 pages. And again, if it ends on half a sentence, that's what you send. Send them the first 50 pages. Some of them want it copy and pasted into the email, but usually with something that long, they want a Word document. But they'll tell you what they want.
So when a Word document that big can be sent?
Oh yeah. I write all of my books in Microsoft Word. I know everybody has their own preference. I'm an English teacher. I like Microsoft Word. Yeah.
I don't know how true this is, but I went to a conference in Ruby Springs last summer, and he was an agent from New York, and he told us that the woman who wrote 50 Shades of Grey took, I think he said $30,000 of her own money and lined out her whole marketing, and that's how that got.
She probably did. 50 Shades of Grey is just Twilight fan fiction. We all know that, right? She published it online. That's what it was, Twilight fan fiction. She had to change the names of Bella and Edward to whoever they are now. But I love fan fiction, so that story actually endeared 50 Shades of Grey to me. And I thought, oh, that makes much more sense. This is a Wattpad story. I get it now. That made sense to me. But you're right. Some people, and I've spent my own money, right? I have spent my own money. When I have a signing, I will purchase my own books from the publisher because it's way cheaper, but they don't ever make me. Nowhere in your contract should it say you have to buy so many copies of your book, right? I do it because I want to have books available for people to buy when I go do a signing. I only had 6 of my own books this morning, so I didn't bring any. But I spend money. I spend money on Facebook ads, especially around the time when my book's coming out. I will spend money, driving. I live in West Plains. Luckily, my mom drove today. My brother lives up here, so she was more than happy to come up. And that's something you have to be willing to do as well. If somebody asks me to come speak, I am there, right? I am going to be there every single time. If I can get there, I'm going to get there. If I can do a signing, I'm going to do a signing. And I'm not going to ask for anything in return because I'm not E.L. James, and I can't do that, right? And I don't want to. I genuinely want to be as many different places as I can be, because the more people that I can talk to, the more connections I can make, the more things I can learn, the more, while I was listening to you all workshop today, I got 6 different ideas that I'm writing down, in my phone, because you were talking about things, and I'm like, oh, that's great. Oh, I like this conversation. I can use this somewhere, right? Because when you're a writer, literally everything that you experience can become a book. So. Is it 12? Yep. Sorry.
High noon.
I'm not good at keeping time. So that's it. But if anybody has any other questions afterwards, feel free to let me know. Thank you.